You're watching PIX on Politics Daily with Dan Mannarino.
Hey everybody, welcome to PIX on Politics Daily on this Wednesday. It is January 28th and we're still dealing with the cold out there, right? And so we are hitting the streets on PIX on Politics. We got our Greg Mocker going out this week and he's going to be looking for you to give a few letter grades, right? He's walking around with paddles that have grades on them. We want to know what you think about storm cleanup, how the subways and ferries and everybody are handling the cold temperatures in the storm. So it's our pop-off of the week. We want to hear from you on that, right? And each and every day we're talking to different potential future congressional members, right? And there's a lot of them. And so we're covering New York 12, covering New York 17, New York 11, and what's going on there with the redrawing of the lines, right? I'll be talking to Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis this week about the redrawing of the lines there and how she is very upset about what's happening. And then yesterday we were focusing on New York 12. Today we're focusing on New York 17, right? So that is a little bit north of New York City. It is currently held by Republican Mike Lawler. And if you look at some of what people are saying, could be considered a swing district, purple. And so there are a few Democrats who are looking to unseat Congressman Mike Lawler, and Cait Conley is one of them, and she is my guest today. So great to see you, Cait.
Dan, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for facilitating these conversations with people to let them know what's going on and who we are as people.
Yeah, super important conversations, and it's a big year, right? And there's a lot going on, unfortunately, in the news, and a lot of eyes are on these congressional races for a number of reasons, right? So let me ask you first and foremost, why you decided to enter the race at this moment in time to challenge Mike Lawler?
Yeah, so my entire adult life has been about service to this country. I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time I felt that call to serve, to follow through on the blue collar values that I was raised with, right? To stand up and fight for what is right. And so I went off to West Point after 9/11 and then served 16 years as an active duty Army officer. The privilege of a lifetime to lead America's sons and daughters in combat zones around this world, deploying overseas 6 times, going to Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, to fight and defend this country that I love. And after a lifetime of service and seeing everything that I have seen, from the battlefields to serving as the director for counterterrorism at the White House, I never thought I would feel like the greatest threat to this country I love and our future would come from within our own borders. And Dan, you opened with, it's challenging times with what we are seeing. I am saddened every day to see a lack of leadership, failures in public service that is putting this country on a path where I don't believe we're going to be doing better at the other end. And that's not okay. And so I'm doing this because I love this country. And I believe America's best days are still ahead of us if we do the hard work. And I've had a front row seat to watching politicians on both sides get us into this mess. And I don't believe they're going to get us out of it.
Okay. So let's talk about you as you have a lot of military experience, and how would you bring that to this office if you were elected?
So as a military leader, you deal with the highest of stakes. It is truly life or death for the people you lead, for where you are operating. And with that, you know the importance of making the best decisions. And I think that is the type of leadership that is called for in this moment. These are not normal stakes. These are not normal times. You are watching as, for the first time in modern American history, the economic prospects of young Americans be worse than their parents or grandparents. Like the struggles that we are seeing with families. America no longer works for working Americans, and that is unacceptable.
So how could you change that if you were to win, right? And what do you believe that Mike Lawler is either doing or not doing to help that situation? And what would you be able to do as a member of Congress?
I think this goes back to not settling for things are too hard to try to solve or fix and to actually deliver. When you talk to people and the things they are struggling with, you unpack the affordability issue. It's everything from crushing energy prices to a housing crisis to just the overall unaffordability of critical goods where people are making trade-offs between prescriptions and groceries. So I'll use a combat trauma analogy. The first step is stop the bleeding.
Okay.
So some of this is the reckless policies of this administration have exacerbated the affordability crisis, not made it better. So the first thing is we need to undo some of the unnecessary harm that this administration has inflicted. with things like reckless tariffs on goods like prescriptions or construction materials, where again, people are already making trade-offs. People are already facing a housing shortage. We need to take those things and undo them to make sure we're not putting upward pressure on prices when things are already crushing. And the other thing is, I mean, look, in my district, we have over 30,000 people that are going to suffer from these Medicaid cuts that were in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Why at a time where people are already suffering are we adding to that? It doesn't even make economic sense. You want people to have health insurance. And so when you look at the harm that this administration has done, the refusal to reinstate the premium tax credits, again, giving people access to health care, that shouldn't be a privilege of the wealthy few, but the right of all Americans. And so the fact that we are making that harder is unacceptable. But I think going beyond that, actually treating some of the additional issues that are out there, we've got to do more to invest in the economic opportunities of today's workforce and tomorrow's. So that's things like investing in career technical ed, vocational programs. Here in New York, we have BOCES, creating pathways to the middle class that don't bankrupt families.
Okay. In the headlines right now, besides the affordability crisis, there's obviously a lot of news about what's happening in Minnesota and ICE, these raids that are happening around the country. So before we get into the conversation, should ICE exist or should it be abolished?
So I am absolutely heartbroken and appalled at what we are seeing, where American citizens on American streets are being killed by American federal agents. That is unacceptable. And I say this as someone, I started my military career as a military police officer in the Army. I've conducted domestic law enforcement. What we are seeing in Minneapolis, that's not about law enforcement. It's not about immigration enforcement. It is about the weaponization of the executive branch by the Trump administration to silence political opposition, to scare and intimidate the American people. It is unhinged and unacceptable. And I say that as someone, again, who's been involved in law enforcement, a former law enforcement officer. And I say this as someone who is pro-immigration. And so I support immigration enforcement that is humane and treats people with dignity.
So
that
ICE
is
should
not what's
exist.
happening.
So ICE should exist, not be abolished.
The abuses should be abolished. ICE, leadership must be held accountable. And I think this is important because people keep focusing on ICE. It goes beyond ICE. I believe Secretary Noem should resign or be impeached.
Okay.
I believe that the leadership in ICE, in CBP, and throughout DHS that oversaw the operations where Americans were killed on American streets should be held accountable and removed from those positions. I believe that there should be transparent investigations and those who are responsible held accountable.
There was also a vote this week on funding, and it involved this conversation about whether or not the government would shut down, right? And part of that was whether or not to fund Department of Homeland Services. Two Democrats in New York, Tom Suozzi, Laura Gillen on Long Island, voted for it, and Tom Suozzi seemed to have now walked that back a bit, saying it was a mistake to vote for it. If you were a member of Congress at this point, would you vote for something like that to keep the government open?
I would have voted against that bill last week because I think going back to the situation we are facing, we need to ensure that there are protections where American citizens are treated safely and securely. And so what is happening right now, what makes me very sad is we just saw an American killed on an American street by an American federal agent. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This should be an American issue. And we should have both sides coming together to figure out how do we make sure that never happens again. And so I do believe that the measures being called for in people who refuse to vote for that bill, things like body cameras, things like improved training and safety and security requirements around use of force, all of those are very reasonable and necessary things when we see what is playing out.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like some of the Democrats were struggling with the vote on that because as a whole, Department of Homeland Security should be funded, but some of the things would obviously go towards ICE that they don't think should be funded.
Well, I think ICE funding is also something that's been established in prior funding bills. What this was really about was implementing additional safeguards and controls on how ICE is operating. And that is essential. And again, what kills me is how is this even a partisan discussion? This is a bipartisan issue. We're talking about the safety and security of Americans. So shame on folks who are making this political versus saying, we are all committed to ensuring that the federal government is serving and protecting the people. And when there is an egregious failure, like what we just saw in Minneapolis twice, clearly something is not working and we need to fix it.
That conversation around that vote was because the government could potentially shut down. And so you would vote no towards it. It's heading towards the Senate right now, but the government could shut down because of it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is unacceptable. Again, going back to the fact that both sides cannot come together and have a discussion around how to protect the lives of American citizens on American streets. This should never come to a government shutdown.
Yeah.
The fact that Republicans like Mike Lawler refuse to engage in this kind of conversation shows that their loyalty is to their party and to this administration and not the people.
And Mike Lawler did have an op-ed out against what happened in Minnesota. I don't know if you saw the op-ed in the Times.
I did, and it infuriated me because this is a pure Mike Lawler play where he puts up smoke screens to actually hide behind the real issues. And so what you are seeing play out in Minneapolis and across this country is about the weaponization of the executive branch. We've seen this in other ways with the Department of Justice, with the FBI, going after political opposition. This isn't about immigration enforcement. And where he tries to hide this behind failed immigration reform policy, that's utter. This is about scaring and intimidating the American people. And the fact that he's too cowardly to call that out just shows who he is.
And we will invite Mike Lawler back, by the way, on if he'd like to come on and talk about why he wrote that and his views as well. But obviously there's a lot of conversation, and I brought this up in the beginning, kind of about the Democratic Party and redrawing of lines, and Nicole Maliotakis maybe in some trouble because of the redrawing of the lines, meaning Dan Goldman would challenge her. What are your thoughts on just the redrawing of congressional maps kind of mid-cycle?
I mean, we've been seeing this across the country, right? Where I believe that voters should choose their politicians and not politicians choose their voters. What we have seen, though—
So you're against it?
In principle, yes. But what we are seeing right now is a Republican Party that is willing to lie, cheat, or steal their way to elected office. And so what I'm not okay with is the Democratic Party just sitting back and letting this play out. And so this goes back to, if people really have an issue with this, like Mike Lawler, then where was he when Texas was redrawing their lines? He was silent. And so the hypocrisy that we're seeing come out, where it's okay for one side to do it but not the other, is unacceptable. And I think this is what the American people are sick of. This is what people in my district are sick of, is politicians who are more concerned about their next election than they are actually serving the people.
So if they're— and I've had this conversation with Nicole Maliotakis where she said, I did speak out against Texas, was against it then, and I'm against it now. And so the Democrats, the argument is, well, they did it, so we're going to do it because we have to fight fire with fire. And somewhere it has to end, right? So where does it end? Does it involve executive action? Is there a vote in Congress to not allow it to take— like, how would you fight it moving forward?
I think this goes back to, I think the country is better when we have districts that are more reflective of the country. This is why I love New York 17.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great example of a truly purple district where not one party or the other can win with just their registered voters alone. 28% of registered voters in New York 17 are unaffiliated or independent. If you want to win the district, you've got to get people to choose you over a party. And I think that is what is going to set this country on a better path, which is when we focus on not being a Republican or Democrat, but being an American. And how do we solve these problems that are plaguing American communities across the country?
We've seen your race in particular, and this district in particular, has kind of made some news with Mayor Mamdani and whether or not he would support somebody in the district. He has made some endorsements for other districts so far. Would you want Mayor Mamdani to support you? Would you welcome that endorsement?
I mean, right now I'm focused on the Hudson Valley in New York 17. I respect what I believe Mamdani represents to so many people here in New York City, which is new leadership, which is young energy that isn't afraid to tackle hard problems and find solutions and refuses to accept that things are just too hard or too complicated. I think that type of energy is what I'm also trying to embrace and bring to the Hudson Valley. Because people, again, they're so sick of politicians on both sides throwing their hands up and saying, this is just too hard. We're not actually solving the real problems for the long term.
Yeah.
And so I will say I'm incredibly proud of the endorsements that I have secured in the district, where I have endorsements from all 4 counties across New York 17, over 36 elected officials, party chairs, former officials, candidates who believe in the leadership I am willing to bring and am demonstrating every day.
Yeah, the reason I bring him up, and it seems to be he is maybe the new face of the Democratic Party. And that's why if he endorses, does it launch people to success? Does it hurt them? and your Democratic opponents have seemed to have welcomed his endorsement if he gives one. And that's why I'm asking if you would accept it as well.
I think New York City is different than the Hudson Valley. I am very proud that my neighboring congressman, Pat Ryan up in New York 18, just endorsed me in this primary and in this fight.
So why would it matter if somebody who's north of you endorses you, but you don't want to answer if somebody south of you endorses you?
I think it's the Hudson Valley instead of New York City, right? What I'm talking about is issues that are facing Hudson Valley communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are very distinct and different from what's going on in different ways in New York City. And so with that, I am focusing on how do we help the Hudson Valley grow and thrive?
Yeah, but a lot of people in the Hudson Valley work in New York City.
They do. And what
And a
we're
lot of what
talking
he's
about is
pitching and what he wants, like say raising taxes, for example, to pay for what he wants in New York City would affect New Yorkers overall across the state.
well, it depends if you're talking about residents in New York City versus residents up in New York 17. So how are you going to fund some of these programs? I think I've been pretty clear that while I respect the leadership he is bringing, I don't agree with all of the solutions that he has brought to light. I don't believe in taxing middle class and working class families to pay for programming at a time where affordability is the number one issue I hear from people in every corner of this district.
He said he wants to tax the wealthy on those things.
And I have not seen a plan in which all of these programs are going to be funded without other people bearing that burden too.
Okay. So I want to talk also about kind of the face of the Democratic Party, and many are saying if Democrats regain the House, who should the speaker be? And if you support Hakeem Jeffries to be the speaker, would you vote for him to be the speaker?
I would. And I think right now, the Democratic Party, we need to coalesce and really orient on what we have to do for the American people, which is deliver, because they can't wait for another 2 or 4 years. Sorry. They can't wait for another 2 or 4 years for its government to actually work and do things. And so instead of the infighting, I think we need to be focusing on the real issues we are confronting.
Mm-hmm.
These are not normal times. These are not normal stakes. What we've seen by the Department of Justice, what we've seen by the Department of Homeland Security in Minneapolis shows that we are facing an administration that is willing to weaponize the executive branch in a way that is unprecedented in our lifetimes. That is the real issue we should and must be confronting.
So, again, when you kind of look at the Democratic Party as a whole, it seems fractured in terms of the mission and the goals of what the plans are to move forward. How would you describe yourself as a Democrat? Are you more moderate? Are you progressive? Democratic socialism now is a big thing. So where do you fall on that whole spectrum? And where do you see the party as a whole needing to come together to win?
Dan, I would push back on just talking about the Democratic Party in this lens. I think part of what has led this country to a place where we are more polarized than we've ever been, where you have families that don't talk to one another because of how they voted in an election. When you talk about how the very fabric of American society is being ripped apart, like part of what made America so strong, and I remember this growing up, my mom and my godmother were just over yesterday, and we were talking about how the Hudson Valley, it is a community where service matters, right? I don't agree with Mike Lawler on a lot of things, but I do appreciate how he describes New York 17. He calls it the District of Heroes, where over 50% of households are either veterans, the family of veterans, first responders, the family of first responders. Service matters. And when you're in these roles, you're not doing it from one party to the other, you're doing it for your community.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that this country, to heal, to get back on track, we need to focus on being Americans first, not Democrats, not Republicans, but Americans. Because the problems I am seeing every day with working families in this district don't just impact one side or the other. And so I just push back and I'm like, look, we need to stop focusing on silos and labels and categories. We are Americans first.
Mm-hmm. But yes, I hear you. And that's all valid points. And I do remember a time where even Republicans and Democrats can come together and talk and have differences of opinion and not be so polarized. But there is something to be said on both sides, Republicans and the Democrats, that there are extreme sides of both party. And there seems to be infighting on those sides within both sides of the parties. So that's why I'm asking kind of where you see the Democrats uniting as a whole on what they need to for the agenda moving forward.
I would even say it's not just about Democrats uniting. I think it's about public servants who are in these positions uniting to work together to deliver for the American people. That should be on the table.
Yeah.
This shouldn't just be about one party getting it done versus the other. And if we continue down that path, I do not believe America is going to fix the dysfunction. And that's a failure on all of us if that's the case. So no, I believe we need to come together and figure this out.
Okay, fair point. Cait Conley, we're going to leave it there. We'll talk to you throughout the campaign, but thank you for coming on for the conversation.
And thanks for having it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Good stuff. And continue to sound off. We're going to invite, by the way, the rest of the candidates for NY17 right here to have another conversation. And we also put the offer out to Mike Lawler as well. But continue to let me know what you want us to cover, okay? What's important to you. We'll be out in the community this week with our paddles, all right? Don't laugh at us when you see us with our A, B, C, D, F, all right? We want to hear from you on the grades. And then this Friday, talking to Nicole Malliotakis and Steve Fulop, who is now the new head of the Partnership for Greater New York, who just took over for Catherine Wild, and former mayor of Jersey City as well. So we'll talk to him on Friday as well. All right, that'll do it for today. We'll see you back here tomorrow.